G'day
Yes.
and welcome back to SPCs Unleashed. We were in a fun conversation when the timer went off and it was all of a sudden, oh, we better actually start talking serious stuff instead of travel plans. But speaking of travel plans, today we are here to talk about the Safe Summit Sorrento. In an ideal world, we'd look at the scenario that said we all went and we've all got our own perspectives and insights. But the truth of the matter is that for various reasons, only Niko and Ali went. And so we're going to have a very strange joyride where two of us who weren't at something attempt to sound wise and insightful about what happened at that thing we didn't go to. And Niko's got the reins to take us on a magical, misty tour through it. So, Niko, on that note, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. And Mark, just one question. Are you sure we're streaming? Because I don't see anything on LinkedIn. Just one small question before we start, really. And sorry if you're streaming and I'm the stupid one.
I'm going to do a tech check, but we are streaming, yes.
Okay,
sometimes you've just got to hit refresh
it's
on
up to me.
LinkedIn. It's very dodgy.
Perfect. Sorry. So yeah, as Mark said, Ollie and I had a nice vacation, a safe summit in Sorrento with a beautiful coast, beautiful trees, beautiful people. So it was really, really cool. And usually we start with surprises and challenges, or we start the show with that. I would like to ask two different questions, and I would like to start with Ollie. So what is your personal takeaway from the summit, except alcohol and no?
Had a lot of that. Yes, had a lot of that. No, other than that, Sorrento is such a beautiful place. The Safe Summit showed me a nuance that I personally very much like. Why? The Safe Summit has always been, also a little bit of a podium to show what Skilled Agile has sort of assembled and what that community has created, and what the new stuff from Safe that is coming up. And what I saw this time is that the framework itself will undergo a couple of changes that most of us have been doing right off the bat, as in. The framework, everything around it should be, contextualized, and that is part of implementing. That is the activities that we do whenever we roll out or install Safe.
Yeah.
We do that. And what Skilled Agile has mentioned was a really nice presentation from Andrew Sales, where the framework will undergo some adjustments. You'll have more industry-specific details sort of packaged together so that whomever would like to use the framework and everything that is around it might be able to look at certain examples from their industry. Way more details, much more than a case study.
Yeah.
And on top of that, scaling down the total amount of, let's say, standard Safe, I don't know how to call it, to scale that down into a more smaller, compact, modular version. And I really like that.
Yeah. What I really loved when I was in Sorrento, so my personal takeaway was again the portfolio slicing workshop, and I think we'll dive in a deeper in the next episode deeper. So I had the chance to moderate it too. Last time in Washington DC, I think there were 70 people. Mark was there facilitating it. Eric was there. Sahil was there. So it was a huge class. This time was also huge, but only not for one extra coach, then for 4 extra coaches. It was really cool for me. And cool was, again, talking with many people. That will come later to the episode. What I really liked was really the exchange. It felt like a different conference than before, where there are so many people. You see them only once, and you say, yeah, let's keep in touch and see you tomorrow, and you never see them again. And this time I've seen them every time, and we just were able to continue discussion after the next session, So my takeaway was really the great discussions we had. And if we go to the topics, was really the competencies. We'll talk a lot about the new competencies or discipline and competence model. During one break, I went to the workshop of configuring Safe safely. Was also cool to see where they are heading to, and also talk to Luke Holman and Mark Ricks to see what they are doing with marketing, with product model, and so on and so on. So they're really cool topics, but also cool people. Let's go with a similar question, because Mark and Stephan, you had other obligations than having nice days in Sorrento. So in your opinion, what was the hottest news? Looking from the outside, looking from your network, what were the hottest news from the SAFE Summit?
Why don't you fire, Stephan?
Okay, I like a good performance. And to understand the performance on the stage, I like peeking behind the curtains. Like you said, Ali, I really sense this nuance that the framework is now shifting into a direction that I really like. If you look at the disciplines and the competencies, it kind of prepares the stage for some new action, maybe even a change of the program, right? And I like that. On the other side, let me be a bit critical, like sitting on the balcony with Mark and looking at you guys who attended the SAFE Summit. For me, it's always like this rope walk. How much guidance do you need for a good performance? And as you mentioned, Ali, as you mentioned, Niko, how do you really configure the framework or the adaptation for any transformation? And that's the ultimate goal. And I'm sure we will talk about that. That's the challenge I like. And the SAFE Summit always has been like a pit stop on my journey or on our customers' journeys. Some attended, some didn't. And for the first time, and that's also a nuance I'm hearing from the customers, some attended, but less people went to the summit and they stayed home for several reasons. I don't know why, but I want to know more about that. Why don't people just go to a summit anymore? What's the reason? Is it economical stress? What's behind that? So again, I like a good performance, and let's talk about performances.
What happens in Down Under? What have you heard?
So I know I got fed lots of things because they got promoted to me by the LinkedIn algorithm. So that's the easiest pass that I have is what's coming out of the LinkedIn algorithm, backed up by what are folks sharing in our Shaping Agility Discord. So, I knew I was missing out on ice creams next to the pool and various things like that. But I think for me, it was a kind of weird perspective I had coming into this one because I'd been doing some work behind the scenes, helping the framework team work on the new discipline and competency model. And so I kind of had this kind of background view of what's the direction of SAFE Reimagined, and obviously our work there was just part of what was happening, and it went alongside things like the configuring SAFE work. If I went, what's the one bit of takeaway that should be coming out to people? It's the fact that they're starting to decouple SAFE, just to be really geeky about it. We've had a framework that's been a monolith and a bigger monolith with a harder release cycle every year since it came out. And the more courses they had, the more translations to other languages they had, the more it suffered from the classic waterfall release cycle because it was so monolithic and coupled. And so much of what I've seen in the early movement for SAFE Reimagined has been, how do we decouple it? How do we set ourselves up to get into more of a continuous delivery model with SAFE? And I know at various moments in some of the background discussions and the workshops with the framework team, I just see them get so excited, particularly Andrew, going, oh man, this makes it so much easier for us to add new thoughts. And I'm curious whether that perception of it's being broken up, it's becoming more configurable, it's becoming more contextual, it's, actually not so longer feeling so monolithic. Is that a sense that you guys felt was coming through in terms of what the audience was seeing in the messaging on the stage? Or
if I may, absolutely. So I've joined as a panelist one of the Agile for Hardware or how should I call it, Safe for Hardware panel discussions. And even though we talked about hardware over there, we also talked about just the, let's say, more general topic of configuring, a way of working or a governance model or an operating model, whatever you would like to call it, for a specific field or industry or a specific context. And that means not skipping over the context. And even though anyone who has been working with, the SAFE framework and has been implementing it and has been teaching it, we know that we focus on the principles and we, if required, we tweak the practice. That's what we're trying to do, which also means that we do not need everything out of the framework. Mm-hmm. But still, forever, there has been a perception, whether it is in the Agile community or the broader Agile community, I should say, or just from the irregular bystanders, there has been a perception that SAFe is huge, and we need to implement everything, and therefore it is. I mean, the big picture is, I always say it's one of the best things, but also one of the worst things that the framework has, because there is, people interpret it as something huge that needs to be installed all at once. And the contextualization, or let me rephrase it, the nuance on contextualization, the focus that is happening right now, that it needs to be contextualized, that make it industry specific, do not neglect the contextual constraints, and then try to find ways of working that match in the context that was felt. So the majority of the questions that were happening, I'm talking about safer hardware right now, but there has been also top discussions about the use of an iterative and an incremental way of working, in which we incorporate colleagues from procurement or marketing, that requires, contextualization. And the fact that those discussions and those talks and, that interest is happening, is there, I think is, it just gives me a good feeling that we're getting back to what the agile way of working is all about, which is, we're trying to look at results and trying to figure out the way of working along the way, something and use something that is not super heavy or difficult or painful to the people that work with it. I noticed that, and I think that's a good thing.
May I pick that up, Ali? My perception or impression was less density of social media for me as an outsider during the summit. And as you said, now this contextualization and the framework provides some of that stuff. Was that really represented in the customer experience talks, or was it just, we all know as well, I'm a bit picky, a summit, the stage is you perform, you talk about your success, but what about the failures? How do we now incrementally evolve into the future? And what are the real challenges that we have to face? That also will influence how the framework will evolve over the time, because that's for me a huge part of the framework team. What's the direction? And not to become overly constrained on certain topics, right? You're also opening the doors for a lot of new competencies. That has two sides. Had a positive side, also might have a little bit of a challenge for the framework not to become overloaded with that. How was that represented in the talks?
If I may, there's what was presented during the summit was a report that has been created by I think it was Steve Maynor who spent most time on it, or who led this initiative, which is called the State of Safe report, which is a freely downloadable report and a culmination of a huge amount of surveys and data that has been collected. It can be downloaded on the website of Scaled Agile. I think you need to enter your name and email address, so it allows you to download the actual PDF. But in there are a couple of key findings, and just from the top of my head, one of the key findings was that contextualization of the framework can go into multiple directions. What we saw. Or for what is being seen in the market is that there are different flavors of how SAFe has been used. Therefore, also wrong versions or painful versions of how SAFe has been used. For instance, that the SAFe organization, the SAFe framework, can be used to rebrand existing structures. So we have a department and we take away the word department, we call it an agile release train. And as a department, we're going to have a PI planning. As a department, there is some department head. We call that not the department manager, but product management, or we're going to call it the RTE, the release train engineer. Or what was also somewhere in the key findings was that certain roles are just, I don't know, not taken seriously. I'll just use my own words, such as the release train engineer. role that is such a driver for change and trying to combine different competences and engineering disciplines all together into a stable team of teams that we call an agile release train. There's so much value in the role that connects people that with different backgrounds. However, sometimes it's still seen as a little bit of a facilitation role. It's something that you do next to your serious work. And whenever we skip over that, whenever we skip over that thought, what you get is sort of a fake implementation of SAFe, or a very ineffective one. One that people are not dumb. Whenever they see that their department is rebranded as an agile release train, and we now have PI plannings, and we have an RTE that doesn't really organize much other than some meetings, people would see that the SAFe implementation is not bringing what it promised. And so there have been a couple of these. There have been these types of insights, and that came back, in the feedback gathering rounds, and nicely summarized in the State of Agile, State of SAFe report. I always talking about the annual State of Agile report, but this is a sort of a similar something. But I recognize that.
I think you just showed us we'll need a new episode about just the SAFe report. Absolutely. And also was cool on stage hearing more about problem solving, about how can we help the clients. And that's something I think it's normal for people who do a lot of consulting and coaching. And I've seen also a shift going away from we are doing. I go to an old episode because I remember Mark made a joke. That's why I was laughing. Seeing an organization as an organism and not as a operating system, you just have to update. And I felt a lot of more. Let's make it more individual. What is your problem? How can we solve the problem? And not say we have here a solution. You just have to install it and then wait, and then it's finished. And what also came to mind while listening to you, one of the clients times ago had such department trains, and he called these trains fake agile release trains with the acronym FART, which was a really cool acronym.
and that is one of your favorite clients to talk about, Niko.
Absolutely. But let's stick on the competences. Stephan asked about how can we be careful not to explode those, because I realized on Fellows Day when they asked us, do you want to contribute on one of the new competences? And I always had in my mind, I want to specialize. I don't want to do everything. Let's go for coaching, because I love coaching. I love systemic coaching. Let's go for that. And then I start reading all disciplines, and I realized, oh gosh, everything is so interesting. And I personally ended up with writing something together with Marit about agility and strategy, because it was a topic I was in years ago, and it's always like a hobby. And then I realized, it's now very much more prominent than before. And let's work again with Marit and do something together there. And I had in my mind, I just want to focus myself on this area, because I think I can provide a lot of there. And I think it's really something we have to be careful. As Stephan said before, it opens too many bridges maybe and too many doors. What's your opinion on this competences and disciplines, not dimensions? Sorry, I'm too in the old framework. Mark, so you helped Agile a little bit with that.
I'm going to jump in because I've had a lot to do with the journey from old to new. And I'll probably just add a little bit of context. If you think back, right, last year, 21 episodes for us on the old competency model. And, it was 7 competencies. It was 3 dimensions per competency, and we did an episode per. And pretty regularly, we'd finish an episode about a specific dimension. We'd hang up, go off air, and then we'd talk to each other off air, and sometimes talk a little bit more honestly. And we go, this dimension feels like it's got a lot of overlap with that dimension. This feels redundant. This dimension's huge. That dimension's small. And, we'd spent a lot of time looking at the whole legacy model through a perspective of what can you get from it and what's missing and what don't we like. And I think we'd kind of, towards the end of our arc on that, I know I had a candidate new model in my head, and it was a very different one to the one that was out there. And was really interesting comparing the frustrations we'd had, the problems we'd observed, some of the things that had been recognized internally. And, one of those was this trap of the formula of 7x3.
We need the third one. What to invent? No.
and that moment of getting to a point of a bit of unleash, no pun intended, was actually pretty big, and there was a lot of excitement in the framework team to go, it opens new palettes for us to talk about new things, but also to talk about things that are contextual, because there's always been this kind of backthread in SAFe. Anything we write about, everybody will do. So we've got to be careful to not write too much about stuff that only some people should do. And getting to that place in the new competency and dimension model to go, actually, we can write about stuff that not everybody's necessarily going to do, or not everybody's going to do all of, but we can present in a way that makes it places you might extend or deepen, as opposed to you must do because it's on the core big picture. That was great. And it was really interesting. You talk about potential for so many competencies. We went through this process where we went, actually, we want every competency to feel kind of the same size. And again, that was kind of fixing some things from the past. But then as soon as you started to do that, wow, you had a long list of competencies. And, I remember we ran through, and boy, the education of the feedback cycles that the framework team goes through with clients, with key customer representatives, with fellows, with everything else before something actually appears on the stage is crazy, the level of discipline they've got around that. But it was amazing the first time we looked, because we had kind of, originally, I think our first draft, we had 4 disciplines, and each discipline had 10 or so competencies. And everybody looked and went, 40 competencies. It's ridiculous. Sort of managing through that was fun. But what I loved, if I think about the big things I loved, perhaps the first one is SAFe has been in a lot of ways a closed ecosystem, right? Any guidance that went up on SAFe had to be handed over the IP rights to SAFe, and it was very much we own the ecosystem. And I think the door really started to open here, because if you look at the extended competencies, well, all of a sudden we've got external collaborators with their own IP starting to bring that self-originated IP into the SAFe ecosystem. And if you compare it to, and let's say team topologies, where they wrote a book, they've got their own IP, and there was a SAFe article that took some of it, and the authors perhaps didn't necessarily agree with how it took it, compared to these active collaborations on some of the new extended competencies. I think that's brilliant. What I also love is the disciplines and the storytelling aspect of the disciplines. Because if you think about SAFe, right, if you're like a person on the street learning SAFe, and I think for us, we've known it for so long and so many versions, we forget this stuff. Person on the street wanting to learn SAFe, how do you do it, right? Do you click around in some systematic way over the big picture? How do you get the story? Well, you can get the story of SAFe by going on a class. Or I used to say to people, if you can't go on a class, you can get the story by reading SAFe Distilled. But it never felt like you could go to scaleagileframework.com and read the story. And now we've got these disciplines, which is a new surface to tell a new story. And you open the discipline, and what do you get when you open the discipline? Well, actually, you get almost like a mini big picture just for the discipline, and then you get the story for the discipline. So there's a surface where they can start to connect concepts for you on the website in a way that, for me, never really existed before. So that's my excitement about the new things. I'm, of course, listening with bated breath to see how people in Sorrento like them, but...
So if I may, there is another way to introduce SAFe to whomever is interested, anyone that wants to begin or to sort of investigate it, which is also something that was presented during the summit, which is something very similar to what we know of the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide, simple PDF, that one was 16 pages, but Andrew Sales presented another PDF called SAFe Explained. It was a little longer than that. I think from the top of my head, like 28 pages or so. But also freely downloadable, an explanation of what SAFe is, what the different elements of SAFe are, how to interpret that in a package that is at least overseeable, rather than indeed sending somebody on a website and practically say, oh, by the way, you can start reading, click somewhere and then start reading. That's sometimes a bit overwhelming. So it's another example of simplification, which I like. I like that.
Yeah, and I volunteered to take care of the translation to German. So it's the SAFe Explained will be translated in many languages. I just got three examples to choose which one goes in the right direction. One was really horrible. The other two were okay, and let's see what's happened the next months. But yeah, you're right, Mark. Having a story available for the people, a possibility to read was really cool. And I just copy pasted a picture from the framework. When you go in a discipline, you really see another big picture telling again the story. In this case, I've chosen LPM, Lean Portfolio Management. So you have much more better content. So if you are interested in portfolio, you have now your own big picture about, or your own clickable explanation about how portfolio works. And this for all the disciplines. Yeah, disciplines. Yeah, not dimensions. Sorry, it's also a D. I have to get used to the new vocabulary. Sorry for that. Stephan, we interrupted you several times.
I'm going to jump in before you let Stephan have it. I can't resist. And by the way, I've got that picture being shared at the moment. I wanted to just probably give one shout out. There's a discipline I think the framework has not really given a lot of prevalence to over the years, and that's UX or design. And it's one of the things I'm hoping this new product operating model will start to see us see more visibly in the framework. But I did just want to give a shout out to a member of the framework team a lot of people probably doesn't know exists because she's never going to get on a stage, and that's Reza. And Reza is their UX person. And she's not a methodologist, right? She's surrounded by methodologists and surrounded by people who are very much professional writers these days. But she gives this ability to bring the UX skill set to bear to advance the thinking. And, what we're looking at with these, this is very much, it's a Reza picture. And it was hilarious for me. I look at the end result here, right? This complete little mini big picture. It's clickable. It's the story surface. I saw the first 5 iterations of that. Let me tell you, it didn't start out like that. And so I think there's a real testament to the value of having a UX person on a team, even when it's a team of crazy, deep thinking methodologists. It's amazing. So anyway.
Yeah, Mark, you just mentioned it. Eat your own dog food, right? It's customer centricity. If you don't know the customer or the user journey, what's the fuss about a framework? But I like this shift towards the dimensions and the different competencies. A huge congrats to the framework team and all those guys contributed towards it. I really like it. Having said that, this is now the challenge, and you mentioned it, Ali, and you guys mentioned it. How do you enter the framework? How do you contextualize? Let's talk about being a change agent, right? No matter what label you have, if you're an SPC or a T or a fellow, I don't care. My challenge is, how do I bring it now into the context, right? How do I make it work? And already the ramp up to the Safe Summit, having access to some material influenced my way of teaching and coaching drastically, right? I hardly start a course with the slides. I start with the simplified big picture, the 4 stories. I'm starting now, and I had a course this week where I said, okay, what dimension are we talking about? And one guy kicked in and said, do you mean essential safe or portfolio? I said, no, let's talk about a dimension. And that's like in sports. If you have a dimension, you enter a discipline, there's a lot of competency behind it, like training competency, material competency, whatever it is used. If you throw a hammer, if you are in a 100-meter dash, different competencies. But it's a discipline which requires some dimension. I really like the picture at the moment, how it is, how it can be used. Having said that, in my intro as well, there's a fine line between now doing the copy-paste again, falling back in old habits, or really using the new stage with all the stuff that is behind the curtain. Happy days ahead.
Great. Guys, we are half an hour. So this usually when I moderate, it's Jiggles time. So we need a jingle for Jiggles time, Mark, next time. So this time I tried something I hope that Mark doesn't ask his avatar to ask AIs to give the answer. So it was really an open question. So imagine the Safe Summit being a roller coaster. Tell me more, Mark. Tell me more.
All right. Well, no, it's not my avatar because I actually used my agent before the show to figure out my roller coaster ride. So I have the ghost train of missed moments.
Ooh.
What?
Okay.
Tell me more.
Well, you see, I originally thought I would be inside, right? When Safe Summit Sorrento was announced, I went, awesome, Amalfi Coast, what an amazing place for a conference. I might even take my wife because there'll be fun stuff for us to do while we're there. And, I spoke last year in Berlin, I spoke the year before in Prague, and I'll come up with a good talk and I'll be there. And for once, instead of just me going to a conference to geek out, I'll have my wife with me. And it'll be just, and then they didn't like my talk. And my wife decided she'd rather go to Japan and look at historic gardens with her mother than come to Italy with me. And I went, you know what? I'm not talking. My wife's not coming. I'm going to stay home. And I convinced myself, it was their fault because they didn't pick my talk because it was going to be brilliant. And I didn't care that I wasn't going. And then it started, right? And the buzz starts to happen. And you see all these people that you really enjoy spending time with and you have really sparky conversations with. And somebody says, oh, it was the best fellows day ever. And it's like, well, I wasn't there. Hence it is.
Maybe that was the reason.
The ghost train of missed moments. Thank you, Ali.
Nah, just I had to make that joke. I'm sorry.
Who wants next? Thank you, Mark.
So Niko is his jiggles. If the Safe Summit in Sorrento was a roller coaster, which one would it be? I would say any roller coaster that goes extremely fast and then all of a sudden, stays still for very long, so that you have the ability to, have a little bit of pre-fun and some after fun, and you chit chat while it's standing still, and then the moment that it starts again, it shoots off, and then again it goes really fast. And I think that's it represents a little bit how I experienced the Safe Summit, even though it was just a couple of days. I mean, it was, we had Monday was the SPCT day, we had Tuesday and Wednesday conference, and that went on so fast. But the thing is, I had the moments that were slower were the moments that I was chatting with people that I knew, or as a matter of fact, I also talked with a couple of people who listen at this podcast. They're like, "Hey, I know you from the podcast. Oh, that's fantastic." So that was really nice. And for whomever is listening also today, thank you so much for spending the time with us on this Saturday, or if it's recorded whenever you're listening to it. But I really like the chats because it's just. You'd get something back of how they experience the new trainings, or what they've been doing with new art launches or lean portfolio management type.
This time it was really easy. When I read the question, the same evening I was watching on TV a series about roller coasters. And a professor from the Cambridge University said they asked people what they think, which part of the ride puts in the biggest heart rate peak. And ostensibly people say during the ride, as you described, Ali, maybe a loop, maybe the moment where you hang up 50 meters over ground and all of a sudden it drops. And they found out, no, that's not the case. It's the case when you start sitting into the cart and when they tie you up, right? That's when your heart rate goes up to the highest peak. That's interesting. For me, always the preparation time, the ramp up time to events like a summit or other events, I must admit, that's really the most intensive time. And then strapping into the event, it's like the retaining bar coming down, right? And I think if you look at that retaining bar, it's a safety system component to master forces. And the Safe Summit is like a part of an ongoing ride. But every time you embark on a new ride, this peak being restrained, but you're not restrained to have less freedom, it's being restrained to master forces. And I think that's for me the kind of the reason why I intend such events, to get better in mastering forces. Everything else is kind of falling into places so that I have a good roller coaster ride.
What a storyteller, Stephan.
I love this part of the show. I love this part. So cool. In my case, I stayed also a little bit on the meta level. So those who know me and my family, we are a huge fan of the Europa Park. So we are spending many vacations there, and once in a while they introduce new roller coasters, and each Safe Summit is for me like a new type of roller coaster. It belongs to a park. It has a theme. It has it's maybe in a country, or it has some kind of a theme, and still you're part of how it's created. So they're calling you for papers. They might get called for paper. They're rejecting you. They're taking you. They're explaining you something, etc. And each time it's I know the whole architecture of the roller coaster. I know when it breaks, when it goes accelerates, and so on and so on. But each time it's excitement, even if it's quite the same, because I'm not sure if you can invent something new in roller coasters. It's always you sit there and it goes. Of course, there are some elements. It's hanging there, or it's on trails, or is it going up, or is it pushed with magnets and so on. But each time it's something new, and this something new, it's a cool thing. So and then you wait online until it opens the first time you ride. You sit there, your heartbeat goes up, and then you're surprised that some elements are different than you thought. And this time I had also many surprises at Safe Summit, and it's not the first one. It's not the first roller coaster, but it was the first one in Sorrento, and it has its own character. So it was really a cool ride. Stephan, talking about rides and going to Sorrento. So I think you asked Safe Copilot about why somebody should attend the Safe Summit. Why should somebody sit on the roller coaster? What was the answer?
Yeah, I did. Because as the old dog in this community here, I forget quite a lot. So Safe Copilot reminded me access to experts. And that's what you already mentioned, right? People talking to other people. There's Ali. I've seen him on Shaping Agility. Then real world experiences with the focus on real world, right? Also admitting failure, but only do it once. And then, as Mark said, iteratively get better over the time. Best practices, probably now with the new dimensions and the core competencies, the next few Safe events probably will shift a little bit when it comes to best practices. Now we are embarking on new journeys. We are introducing new competencies. I'm looking forward to that one. Networking opportunities. It's a people business, right? I like networking. I like talking to you guys. I like talking to my clients. That's what I really missed this time, not going to Sorrento. And then in-depth training, you mentioned it, Niko. Like, what about the new training regarding lean portfolio management? Also looking forward to these kind of things that will surface over the time.
I'd like to just jump in on the back of a couple of those points that Copilot gave a good comment about starting. One of them would be real world experiences. Like I used to once upon a time, I would go to every customer story at a Safe Summit. That was how I planned my Safe Summit. It was like, go to every customer story because I wanted to hear real stories. Then, of course, what I learned was the story you hear on the stage is the one that the legal team at the customer allows them to tell.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really interested in learning from the good stuff. I was interested in learning from their pain points. And most people don't get to talk about them. So I made a habit of following up. I'd find the social events, I would find the dinners, I would find, the whatever the opportunity. Go and see somebody who shared a customer story on stage and go, hey, now we're off stage and there's no microphones and recordings. Can we talk a little bit more deeply? And I think for me, that's probably the thing that Copilot missed in that list was it's not just the access when you go to a session, it's the conversations you can have when you're out of a session.
Let me say something I think nobody knows in the show. How the show was created, or this podcast was created. We started in writing articles, and we realized the time between the articles is the most fun and most interesting part. So we're starting just broadcasting our discussions. And meanwhile, I think the time between the shows, when we prepare and we are finished, I think are the most interesting. Maybe we need a behind the scene podcast, just talking openly, like you said, in stage. But sometimes I'm too crazy. I'm still in my sleeping mode because we have still vacation here. So maybe I'm not 100% fit in mind.
Let's put a listening device on Mark that follows him all day through. And that will be a very, very successful and influential streaming. Looking forward to it, Mark.
But one thing that triggered me, Mark, you said having experts on stage, having time to talk to them. Ali, you were facilitating the hardware cycle as a discussion club or as a circle. Any trends from there or any insights from the hardware part?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, making a brief link back again to the state of safe report, because I've opened it up on my laptop and I scrolled through it and I was like, oh yes, indeed. A part of the feedback was it's actually for whomever would like to follow. I think this is page. Come on, is it? Oh, well, I don't see the page number just yet. I think it's 38. 38. There it is. There was a question about what about evolving safe? So what should it contain or what should it emphasize? And rather than just simplification and flexibility, it also talks about, it also has summarized it to having safe open enough, or maybe even recognizing the integration of other methodologies. And that includes blending safe with ITSM, ITIL, traditional project management approaches have been mentioned over here. Why? And that's written down in the next page. It talks about that, especially in the large organizations, and especially in organizations that use safe in environments outside of just IT or software development, phase gate approaches. There is what we call traditional project management, which is still ongoing project management. That those kind of governance structures are still in place, not necessarily because the company or the enterprise wants it, but because maybe the Department of Defense of the local country in which the company is situated demands that. Or because of industry standards, because you're creating medical devices and there are just specific compliancy rules. They demand that. So having the ability to, and maybe even the guidance to use safe in these type of contexts is just what the industry wants, what the industry needs. So I'm and I've been talking about the safe for hardware, let's say the use of safe in hardware environments, and the discussions that we had and the examples that were shared and the chats that happened right after really emphasized about then how do you iterate until these phase gates? What type of people that are traditionally involved in these phase gates are still involved if we have an RTE and product management, product owners who are way more sort of busy with the ongoing work. So there is less to report out, or there's a different stakeholder group to report out. So how does that work? And I found that angle really interesting, simply because I think it generates a precedent for publishing practical guidance. So those case studies that Mark just talked about, the customer stories. I mean, that Mark just talked about. I mean, on the SAFE website, as a Skilled Agile framework website, forever we had these customer stories. Back in the days, we called case studies, and these are pretty high level sort of experience share back. But there's just a need for some more specifics, and I think that that is what the safer hardware training material, but just also the knowledge capture around it is doing. It's diving a little bit more into these specifics.
The fascinating thing for me about that, because I was reflecting back. I don't know if you guys remember when we did one time after, I think when we got to the end of our competency, we all got together and we had a chat about like what competencies would we kill. I don't know if you guys remember this, right? And between us, we figured out we would actually kill, because the large solution competency.
Yes.
Right? We all looked at it and we went, we think this dimension should go in portfolio management, this dimension should go in here. And we basically went, kill off the large solution one. And when time came that we started thinking about disciplines, because really what used to be competencies is now reframed as disciplines, I was on that mission, right? And part of my role as I was working with the framework team was I would suggest crazy stuff and they would put me back on the ground. And I wanted to retain, we've got to kill that. And they're like, but it's really important. We've got all these stories. And I'd look and I'd go, all those stories are not really about large solution. They're about things that come in certain contexts where you have to care about them. And, something like the hardware discussion you just had, right? In some ways, what you just did was you talked about something that's nothing to do with hardware, because it's not hardware specific, but it's a situation that people doing, say, for hardware perhaps find themselves in much more frequently than others. And I think this is the interesting tension point for folks to go, at what point, how do people find the help? Because I think there's an awful lot of people who aren't doing hardware that have the problem you just talked about, Ali. And it's really fascinating to me how SAFE, as they maintain their knowledge base, make available that kind of information, knowing that if you're doing hardware, it's just one reason why it might be relevant to you.
And I think that's happening for the good.
Cool. Now we have a little surprise because we don't have so much time left. I would ask you guys to put the things you want to talk to in the inner circle of our mirror board. Sorry for the audience. It's now you can have no idea what I'm talking about. But if there's something you want to talk about the next 5 minutes, please put it in the circle. Only one thing, and then we go through it. Maybe we should share the inner circle for the audience later. So
just while people are dragging,
because we're running out of time.
I'm going to do a screen share, by the way, folks. This is our Miro board that facilitates our posts or our episodes. And the inner circles, this one I'm just zooming in on, where we're all picking the thing we most want to talk about. So hopefully I've bought us enough time.
Let's go with Stephan.
Yeah.
And the question is, what do we expect between now and Denver? You all chosen the yellow one, so no other topic. So we stay with the last question. Great. Stephan, what do we expect?
Yeah, I think based on what we just discussed, a more fluid framework for competencies, but you can tie them to the disciplines. So you have kind of a structure in there and you know where to start your journey. Perhaps a cleanup of products, courses, MCs, skills. And that's probably the hard work that the SAI people are doing now till the next summit, so that we have a more consistent framework. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to challenging the contributions and the talks and even the different competencies, because there's some really good work in it. Look at transforming people development, but I will question, should we have people developers? Because if you do the mapping of what people development is, you already have it in the process authorities. So that's probably the game we will have for the next few months and years. And the hope for me is to also get a clear answer to the dual operating system, which is still a big pain for our customers. My interpretation of Kotter is there's only one operating system, the one you have, and not the one you probably try to achieve, and is probably not even feasible. So these are my expectations for the future.
All right, I'll go next. Look, obviously, there's more competencies to come. I'm assuming there's more work on the configuring safe stuff, but I know with the competencies that I think the goal was to go live. I haven't gone back and checked. I think the goal was to go live with kind of 2 or 3 competencies from every discipline in the new format. And so there's a lot of competencies in the core competency space to fill in between now and Denver. There's also obviously new extended competencies. But I think what fascinates me most, and this comes back to context and problem orientation, is if you think about the big picture and the elements of the framework, they're organized for a methodologist. I have a framework, it has 5 disciplines. I click on a discipline, it has 10 competencies and 2 extended competencies. And, this is the way I think about things. Or I try and find myself on the picture and I click on the thing I think is going to help me. But if you look at it another way and you go, actually, there's a whole bunch of building blocks, right? There's all these base articles, and sometimes a single article is the answer you need. Or there's competencies, and often what a competency will do is it will collect a group of articles and say, the first thing you should do if you want to get somewhere with this competency is go and read these 6 articles and maybe watch that summit presentation. But it's still just a building block orientation. And the thing that I was most excited about, and I always got in trouble with the framework team because I'll go, think about what it's enabling as opposed to just the pizzazz of itself. For me, the enablement was to go, I could do a scenario and go, if I'm in this situation, right, and I'm struggling with these things, but this stuff's going well, then I think probably I should be focusing on these 2 competencies from this discipline and this 1 competency from that discipline, And if I use them together, they'll help me where I am. So starting to look at different ways of, a situational navigation of the competencies as opposed to a logical decomposition and navigation orientation of them. And then if you go a little bit further and you go, actually, I can start to think about how I might train Safe Copilot to get to the point where somebody could get onto the website and go, this is where I am, what should I be looking at? And it can go, if you look at this combination of competencies and you thread them together like this will help you. And giving people different ways to find the stuff that's really going to help them where they are.
I think my hope is that between now and, maybe the next Safe Summit, or at least in the upcoming years, the main topics that are described in the State of Safe report, such as there are difficulties in value stream funding. So, an issue or problem that a lot of companies face for very, very valid reasons, regulatory requirements, issues, it's a very hard change to make, and so forth and so forth. If a lot of questions arise from these types of problems, it's a very good space in which to search for solutions, maybe even to publish existing solutions. And so I really hope that in the upcoming year or so, we're going to see some more ideas, guidance, examples that are related to the topics that are mentioned or deemed to be problematic or difficult for most. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, what we unfortunately missed in this show, which we prepared already, there is a new workshop out there for advanced SPCs about I call it portfolio slicing. If you're in a company with several kind of portfolios, which portfolio to slice. But I think we have to do this in a differently episode as a whole. And it makes also sense to talk about the state of Safe report and about the new safe disciplines. So we just opened 3 new episodes. And I think Ali should, in the background, try to choose which one is next for next Saturday. So I'll let you do the work. You have an area to remove the post-it and say which one you want to moderate next time. But closing, just one takeaway of the Safe Summit of this show. What is it?
I'll jump in.
If I can
there
start.
You go. There we go.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
going.
Okay.
Okay, Mark starts.
I'm starting. So I think mine would be Safe Summits are really expensive, but also really rewarding. And the trick is you got to know why you're going and how you're going to get the most from it. And, all the things you can do while you're there. And it could be as simple as, are you going to sign up for the SPCT coaching station? Every time you go and sit down for lunch, are you going to look for a table full of people you don't know instead of a table full of people you do know? What are you going to do to find and have deeper conversations with people outside the room? Or who are you going to consult for guidance on who's a good speaker, right? And why you should always go and watch Ali or Niko. So plan it. That's along just one key takeaway, but plan it.
We all heard, and me included, we all heard the market to talk about simplification or to simplify. Well, I think the response of SAI speaks for itself.
I think as a change agent, if I want less roller coaster and more sustainable rides, I'll be there. And you hopefully as well.
And my takeaways is a meta takeaway: small batches and continuously evolving of Safe. That was my takeaway of Safe. And what happened for me was now I really also feel the pace, because years before, was slowly. You wait for the big bang. And now every once in a while you have to read stuff. And I haven't read even all disciplines that are out since Summit. So small batches. And with that, Mark, bring us home.
Well, I'm going to bring us home because I can share that Ali has chosen that next week he'd like to host an exploration of the State of Safe report. So I think you've just volunteered yourself, mate. And some fun prep for us in the week to come. And stay tuned. Stay with us. Join us next week. And we had at least one live person. Nicole, thank you for joining us and chipping in on LinkedIn. Nicole or anybody else who's been watching, we're keeping an eye on your comments. If you've got a question or something you want to add to the discussion and you just pop it in a comment, we'll bring it in. We're watching, we're ready, and we're willing. And if you hadn't known, we love getting curveballs. That's why we let Niko give us a jiggle every week. And live curveballs are even more fun. So we'll see you all next week for the State of Safe survey.